Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders, a podcast where people connected to autism inspire change and build community. Together with the Global Autism Project, I'm your host, Rachel Harmon, a professional with over a decade of experience in the field of autism services, outreach, and advocacy. What's the difference between object visualizers and visual-spatial thinkers? And how can these two kinds of brains work together? In this episode, Dr. Temple Grandin discusses these and other topics featured in her book, Visual Thinking: The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. This episode is part one of my conversation with Dr. Temple Grandin, which was originally released on December 15, 2022. Dr. Temple Grandin is well known for both her pioneer work as an autism advocate and her lifelong dedication to animal welfare. Through groundbreaking research aimed at understanding her own autistic mind, and by being one of the first adults to publicly disclose that she was autistic, Dr. Grandin propelled the awareness of autism during a time when very little was known of it. She's an incredible source of hope for children with autism, their parents, and anyone with a dream. In this conversation, we discuss object visualizers versus visual-spatial thinkers, Temple's ability to think in pictures, the importance of hands-on learning, how to screen for visual thinkers at school, the need for skilled workers, how complementary thinking styles can work together, and how to improve the school system and properly educate different kinds of thinkers. In this episode, discover what's possible when all minds are put to use. And now, I present you Dr. Temple Grandin. Hi, Temple. Welcome back to Autism Knows No Borders. Thanks for being here today.
It's great to be here.
So our last interview was almost 2 years ago, December 2020. So what are some updates? What have you been up to since then?
Well, one of the big things I've been up to is my new book on visual thinking. This is my new book right here. Visual Thinking: The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. And that was my big COVID project. And just before COVID hit, I went on a trip to a poultry processing plant, 2 state-of-the-art pork processing plants, and a Steve Jobs theater. And I realized there's major stuff that we're not making. Like, for example, for a state-of-the-art poultry processing plant, how about 100 shipping containers from Holland for the equipment? And this really got me thinking. The glass walls on the Apple mothership building and the Steve Jobs theater are from Germany and Italy. Highly specialized glass with the electrical wiring hidden in it. And we didn't make that. And so I started looking more into this, and I found out that we did not make the state-of-the-art electronic chip-making machine.
We being Americans.
Well, we used to build an entire poultry processing plant. Now we build the building.
I see.
Refrigeration we build, but we don't do all the specialized mechanical equipment that would go inside the poultry processing plant. It's from Holland. Okay, so I got to thinking, why is this happening? We've got an issue here with skill loss. And when I was out working on beef plants all the time, I have a piece of equipment I worked on developing called the center track restrainer system. You can look it up on Beef Plant Video Tour with Temple Grandin. And when we were putting these systems in the early 90s, there were a lot of little shops that built these things. All the people I work with have retired, and a lot of them are not getting replaced. Here's the reason why. We're paying the price for taking out shop classes in a lot of our high schools 20 to 25 years ago. Another thing where we've got a price is a lot of the people that I worked with that had multiple patents, owned a great big shop, were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. Now that there's no shop classes, they get shunted in special ed and they're playing video games in the basement instead of building specialized equipment. Another big mistake the industry made, and this is not limited to the meat industry, is shutting down in-house engineering departments. 20 years ago, I could go down in a plant maintenance shop and we want to build some hydraulic stuff. They could just build it. Many of my clients have lost that ability. It was cheaper to just let local shops do it. Well, when they run out of local shops, then you've got a problem. So this book starts out about skill loss. And then I talk about the different kinds of thinking. There's actually two kinds of visual thinking. There's visual thinking, my kind of visual thinking, where I think in pictures, object visualization. Everything I think about is a photorealistic picture, and that's shown very, very accurately in the HBO movie. And we're good at animals, anything mechanical, art, and photography. Now, the other kind of visualization is visual-spatial. This is your mathematician, your pattern thinker, not picture thinker. These are your mathematicians, your computer coders, and we have plenty of those, and they get degrees at the university. But the people I've worked with, many of them would be special ed kids today, probably barely graduated from high school, but they took a welding class, started a little shop, and it grew. And some of the shops got so big, they have a corporate jet. And this is where we've lost skills. There's a connection here between autism, dyslexia, and ADHD, and losing skills in specialized mechanical equipment.
And this is the object visualizer, you're saying?
I'm an object visualizer.
Okay.
Everything I think about is a picture. Okay, let's say you want to find out how I think. Give me a keyword. Pretend I'm Google for images. And don't give me something I can see here in this room. Think up something creative for a keyword, not something that I can see in my kitchen here.
Roller coaster.
Okay, I am seeing an old Coney Island roller coaster. I'm seeing different roller coasters. I'm kind of going through the roller coasters. And I'm actually afraid of roller coasters. I've never actually been on one.
Okay.
Now I'm seeing other carnival rides I really liked. And then some of those I did go on, like the thing called the Roundup. It's now called Anti-Gravity. And then I remember going on the website for that carnival ride. And they were very proud of the fact, no computers, no complicated electronics. In other words, they got to haul this thing around on a semi-trailer. And now I'm seeing the big truck I followed home last night from the airport. And he was waiting a bit, and I wanted to get by him.
So your brain just follows this kind of train of thought.
But you see, there's some logic to it.
Yeah.
It's not random. Okay, I started out with roller coasters. Then I got to other carnival rides. Okay, see, there's a link there. Then I'm getting to a specific carnival ride that I saw last year at our county fair. I really liked the hydraulics on it. So then I looked up their website.
Yeah.
And they were making it very simple so that people could take this trailer, mount it right around, and you needed about one brain cell to assemble the thing.
What if you hear a word that you don't know, that you're not familiar with, like a foreign word?
Well, if you give me the U.S. word for dog, I see Cheryl Miller has some corgis. I see them. I'm seeing a picture of a dingo I looked at last night in a magazine. But if you say chien, the French word for dog, now I'm seeing dogs from things in Paris related to dogs.
Oh, interesting.
The foreign word it gives a slightly different set of pictures.
Okay. So in Spanish, if I say the word baño.
I know that's a word for what we call restroom, the toilet. But I'm also saying cattle dipping vat, because in Spanish, the cattle dipping vat is called the baño.
Oh, interesting.
So now I'm seeing the cattle dipping vats as shown in the movie. And I'm now back on the job at the Red River Feed Yard and seeing things that we did there.
Yeah. Okay.
Because in Spanish, that same word is used for a piece of cattle equipment.
So what are the statistics of people who are visual thinkers? Well, let's start with people who think in pictures like you.
Well, I've worked with a lot of people worked in shops. One of the things about my kind of thinking is you can't do higher math. See, there's two parts of engineering. There's the mathematical part where they calculate everything. Then there's the visual thinkers like me that just see how to do stuff. And I'm very concerned that in our educational system, we're getting screened out. One of the reasons why Holland, Dutch companies making this equipment, is in 9th grade, around age 14, that kid can go university route or go tech skilled trades route. And very high-end skilled trades is one of the places where you don't need a college degree. I worked with people who are highly dyslexic, very autistic, and 20 patents. They're all retirement age now. And they're selling this stuff around the world. Complicated, clever equipment. I have to be vague about what it is because they're not formally disclosed.
Okay, got it. So, what are the statistics around autistic people who are visual thinkers?
Well, one mistake I made back when I wrote Thinking in Pictures, my earlier book, back when I did this book, and it's like 25 years ago, it now has a 25-year anniversary edition afterward. I made the mistake of thinking that everybody on the autism spectrum thought in pictures. Well, I immediately heard about it on the Amazon reviews. And I realized that was wrong. And then I sort of kind of investigated, and I found that there's some that are very verbal. These are the individuals that love history and facts and sports statistics. Then I figured out there's another kind of pattern thinker who thinks in patterns rather than pictures. And I found this out interviewing people. The pattern thinker, I first got an inkling that existed when I read Clara Claiborne Park's book, Exiting Nirvana, about her autistic daughter. And when I was reading that book, and I looked at all the patterns she did on beautiful pictures of houses as she decorated with all kinds of patterns, I go, wait a minute, there's thinking in patterns. And then when I did the autistic brain, I found journal articles that supported the idea of an object visualizer like me, and then a pattern thinker. And there are different kinds of thought. And then, of course, in my new book, Visual Thinking, I've got an entire chapter just on research that shows that object visualization, like me, and the visual-spatial mathematical pattern thinker are two different kinds of thinking. And they approach problem solving in different ways. And we need all these skills.
Yeah. Could you talk about some of the different ways they approach a problem?
Well, let's just take the Fukushima accident. I have a chapter on disasters. The regular mathematically trained university engineer calculates risk. And the mathematicians did a perfect job of making Fukushima earthquake proof. It shook and it shook and it shook and it shook and everything was fine. 20 minutes later, the tsunami drowned it. And simple watertight doors would have protected the electrically operated emergency cooling pump. Now, you see how basic that is? I can't design a nuclear reactor. But all I know is that electric pump doesn't run. It's very, very bad. That's all I know. Simple watertight doors. They didn't see it. That's seeing risk. That's seeing risk rather than calculating risk. So this is where you need both kinds of thinkers. Maybe you need me for safety systems. Because I can see the risk. I see a regular steel door. And I'm going, I know what's going to happen to that with 2 meters of water up against it. It's going to bust out, and that basement's going to be flooded 3 seconds later.
Yeah. So I just want to take a step back because you were talking about the different kinds of visual thinkers. Now, what other kinds of thinkers are there? So there's auditory thinkers, right?
Well, there's people that are definitely auditory. And some dyslexic people prefer audiobooks. In fact, interestingly enough, when I got royalty checks for Thinking in Pictures just recently, I was surprised that a third of it was audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
A third of it. Now, that didn't used to be true. But a big third. And then I'm also happy to say that Visual Thinking made the New York Times bestseller list for 1 week.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Both in ebook and in paper.
So is there any other type of thinker? You have visual, auditory, tactile, or?
Well, you see, you have, Howard Gardner's, different types of thinking. Now, kinesthetic, I didn't look at that.
Okay.
That's more athletic thinker. Since I've worked so long with building trades and with building and designing things, I was particularly interested in the engineering stuff.
Yeah.
Because we're not making things like a state-of-the-art electronic chip making machine. It's from Holland. And, well, we're losing skills. And I can tell you, these kids are playing video games in the basement when they should be building things. They're growing up not using tools. I'm seeing students growing up today totally removed from practical things. I had a girl in my class last year who had never used a ruler or tape measure to measure anything. in her life.
Wow.
A mom saying, oh, paints and markers are too messy. I won't let my kids have those. Well, you have them like in certain places in the house. Like I had all those things as a kid, and boy, they were not allowed in the living room. That's for sure.
Right.
But, kids are not doing hands-on things.
So, how do you think visual thinkers can be screened at school? What's a way to kind of identify them in children?
Well, I can tell you right now, can't do algebra. Can't do algebra. It's too abstract. And I'm seeing that screening them out. I've seen situations where a visual thinker was kept out of an auto mechanics class because they couldn't pass the algebra prerequisite. And then some object visualizers like me are really good at geometry. I never got to take geometry because they kept bashing away on algebra. So I had to manage to get a PhD. I had to major in psychology, pick something out that required less math. I got a C as in Charlie in statistics, enough A's in other classes to offset that. But I'm concerned that we're losing skills. I mean, let's look at things like repairing elevators and escalators. I've been on some really weird elevators lately that miss floors because they haven't been serviced. That was in September. Went to a major airport, 4 people there working on an escalator, then it all torn apart. 3 out of 4 with gray hairs. Yeah, this is a concern. Who's going to repair stuff? They're not getting replaced, and especially the object visualizers. And none of the people I worked with that had 20 patents on complicated mechanical equipment could do algebra.
So, is there a way to, like, maybe you're not a natural object visualizer? Is there a way to develop this kind of skill?
Well, I think you could partially develop it. You see, most people are mixtures of the different kinds of thinking. They're mixtures. But when you get a label, autism, dyslexia, ADHD, something like that, sensory processing disorder, whatever, you might be an extreme object visualizer or an extreme mathematician. And what the research has shown is these are different types of thinking. You will not find an extremely good object visualizer and an extremely good mathematician in the same person. They're different ways of thinking. So then I want to really emphasize complementary skills. Let's go back to food processing, where I spent a lot of time out on big construction sites. And my kind of mind makes all the clever equipment. Think packaging equipment. You can look up the Apollo chicken harvester machine. Looks like a combine for picking up broiler chickens. It's from Italy. Very clever. And then refrigeration, boilers, structure of the building. That's the mathematical engineers. That's what your university engineers do that. But you see, you have to have both kinds of engineering to have a factory.
Yeah.
But you see, most people in education don't know anything about factories or business. And then one of the ways to get kids that are addicted to video games off of them has been mechanics. It's been very successful. They find out that fixing cars is much more interesting than video games.
Right.
That's been successful. But there's a relationship here, what's going on in special ed and what's going on out in industry. And that was the reason for doing visual thinking. Now, here's another example of collaboration. Betsy Lerner, my co-author, is totally verbal, totally linear in her thinking. I'm associational. So I did the rough drafts of the chapters, and then Betsy smoothed them all out.
Okay, yeah.
That's both kinds of minds working together. In a complementary way, recognizing where our different kinds of way to problem solving and doing things can work in a complementary manner. And that's what we did on this book.
Okay.
I get asked all the time, what could I do if I could wave a magic wand in education? I'd put all the hands-on classes back in. Art, sewing, cooking, woodworking, metalworking, auto shop, theater, music. Okay, now kids are going to tend to gravitate towards stuff they're good at. But we've got kids growing up today that never use tools. Or I've seen parents get so locked into an autism diagnosis that even though both parents were computer programmers, they didn't think to teach their 8-year-old kid who's super good at math programming because they got so locked into the label. The other thing is the math kids solve problems differently than the more verbal teachers solve them. A math kid can look at an algebra formula and just see it, just give you the answer. It's a different way of thinking. And the teacher's going, you have to do it out step by step. and then the kid gets frustrated and become a behavior problem.
Yeah.
No, you need to let these math kids do it their way and move them ahead. Move them ahead. And let's cut back on the word problems and give them more old-fashioned algebra books. Dig them out of the attic. That's what some of those kids need, where it's all numbers rather than words.
What about for object visualizers? What's a way to educate them in the classroom?
Well, lots of hands-on things. Now, things like reading, I didn't read at age 8, at 3rd grade. And mother taught me with phonics. And we read out loud, and I carefully sounded out my words. That's how I learned to read. Also, I had all kinds of hands-on things that I did as a kid. I was watching a show the other night on Legos, making all kinds of, the assignment for high school kids was to make amusement park out of Legos. And that's wonderful. And they were very creative. They had, rides and stuff that went around. But there's a point where you need to go beyond Legos. How about tools? How about making stuff from scratch? Too many kids grow up today never using tools. Well, how can you know whether you like tools or not if you don't try them?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of exposure. I was exposed to playing a little flute when I was a child. I couldn't do it, but I was exposed. Another kid's going to pick that flute up and take off with it. So I'm a big believer in exposing kids to a whole lots of different things.
Yeah.
And seeing what they gravitate towards.
Right. So for parents, what's a way that they can encourage these kinds of... Thanks for tuning in to Autism Knows No Borders. Be sure to subscribe and come back next week for part 2 of my conversation with Temple Grandin, where she shares her insightful ideas on how to solve some of the world's biggest problems. Thanks for listening. Take care.